You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
This episode is brought to you by Palmolive. Family time isn't just the big moments. It's weeknight dinners, sitting around the table, everyone talking all at once. So when the plates are empty and the sink is full, use Palmolive Ultra. Palmolive's most powerful formula removes up to 99.9% of grease, leaving your dishes sparkling clean. And the new convenient pump makes cleaning even easier, so you can spend less time tackling dishes and more time together. Shop now at palmolive.com.
Spring is here, and there's a whole new way to chai at Starbucks that's made perfect for you. Choose your sweetness, dial it up, or keep things light. Add a touch of pistachio, a hint of strawberry, or vanilla, or make it a spring classic with lavender. Because this season, there's endless ways to chai at Starbucks.
I'm a big fan of if you're gonna go hard.
I'm Jenny Williamson.
And I'm Jen McMenemy.
And this is Ancient History Fangirl,
our book club edition.
We are so thrilled to welcome New York Times and USA Today bestselling author Katee Robert onto the show. Katee has sold over 2 million copies of their books worldwide and swims in the waters of dark romance, romantasy, paranormal, and monster romance, and so much more, including the acclaimed Dark Olympus series, Deal with a Demon, and Wicked Villains. Their work is often queer, poly, kinky, and always just absolutely filthy. Welcome, Katee.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
We are so thrilled to have you here. This is going to be so great.
Yeah, we're such big fans. I, in particular, found you from the Dark Olympus series. And last summer, when Jenny came down to visit me in North Carolina, I gave her The Court of the Vampire Queen, and that was it. We were both so hooked.
Oh my God, that was like, I was just like, this is the perfect beach read. And also, I think that one of my favorite things about Court of the Vampire Queen, the sex starts up on like, what, page 3? It's the best.
Oh, it's so quick. Yeah, that book was a wild adventure that I wrote just in like a time when I was like, no, this is what I want. I'm going to do this thing. And it still cracks me up that it's like in major retailers because I'm like, are you sure? Do you know what's in this book? You know what? It's fine. I'm not going to ask questions. Thank you.
It's so good.
Don't ask questions. People are like, just take my money, please. So we have been asking everyone this, and I am just dying to know how you got started writing romance. What is your smutty origin story?
So I kind of fell into romance sideways. So many of my peers and friends had that paper bag full of Harlequin and like it was love at first sight. My mom wasn't a big romance reader. She read a lot of like romantic suspense, like heavier on the suspense side. And so I would pick up her books after she read them, like in like junior high-ish. And I found Iris Johansen through her. And then I went to my library and just trotted down there, 13 years old, and like was like, what else has Iris Johansen wrote? And I found The Magnificent Rogue, which is historical romance, and it is a scorcher. It is. Like I reread it a couple years back, and it's quite hot.
I love it when they hold up.
So I read everything she had written. But then I didn't realize that it was like a genre that like other people wrote that, and I moved on. And then in like my early 20s, I was in that paranormal urban fantasy and realized that the things that I like about those books are the romance. I mean, I like all the other stuff too, but like the romance was like what I was always rooting for. And then I was like, oh, there's a whole genre of this. And during that same time, Twilight was like, I think Eclipse had either just come out or was about to come out. And I like read the first 3 books in like a weekend. And I was just like, and got really into Stephanie Meyer's story. I was very young. It was just like, wow, if she did it, it was so easy for her to get published. I bet it would be easy for me to get published and do this full time. That's not how any of this works.
So easy. It is the easiest thing.
The most simple.
I read Twilight and I remember thinking, this is not the most brilliantly written book, but I cannot put it down.
It's so cracky and sticky.
Yeah, whatever she's doing, how she works those tropes. Like, there are moments in that book where you're like, this is not good, but I can't stop. Until I got to the 4th one, but that's another story.
I had a lot of feelings about that one. I married very early and I had two children under two in Germany and was living, like my ex is a military person and I was living off base in a country where I didn't speak the language and going out of my damn mind. And so I took a lot of inspiration from, I think it was Nora Roberts, had like, she's basically was like, I started writing so I wouldn't kill my family. And I'm like, yeah, no, me too. And so like it took me eight books, and I started in young adult and then kind of wandered my way through and like sort of accidentally wrote a romance, and that's what sold. And then I was like, no, but I do like this. And here I am, 12 years later.
You started out as indie, right?
So I actually started out small press. Like Entangled Publishing had just launched, like right around the time that I got picked up by them. And then my editor at the time was like, hey, do you want to do this full time? And I'm like, I really do want to do this full time because I'm working a minimum wage job that I hate. I'm a single mom and everything sucks. And it just was like this kismet of timing. Like I wrote this book for her really quickly. They launched this imprint that was like category romance, like spicy category romance called Brazen. And I just happened to write the book fast enough that it was part of the launch. And 50 Shades of Grey was doing huge numbers at that point. And like, we just got lifted with that wave. And then I quit my day job and it was great. But then the market changed a couple years later. Like I did some really cool stuff. I worked with some really cool publishers. And then the market shifted to rom-coms. And I tried to write a rom-com, and I am forever grateful that I did not sell it because I would have been miserable. It's not really my like forte. And so it was like, we're going to have to get a day job or we're going to have to go indie and like get over, the stories. I have ADHD and like autism. And so like my whole life was like, man, you just can't get your shit together. Like you're really smart, but like you don't have the ambition, you don't have the drive, you can't, like run a business. And so I kind of had to like deal with that negative self-talk that had been drilled into me. And I was like, I guess we're going to try because like I don't have a choice. And turns out I really like indie. And no one was telling me no. Like, because I come up with like category romance where it's like the rules are really stringent. Like you have to write in this little box. And it actually was really good for my craft because it's like, how can I tell my story within this confines? But then even when I moved on to like writing mob romances, like they still tell you no to things. They're like, oh, we can't sell that, or we can't, you can't put a poly romance in the middle of this straight romance series or like whatever. And then no one told me no. And I was like, I'm going to write villains and I'm going to just do whatever I want. And it's going to be so much fun. And I kind of reclaimed my joy of writing. And then the market or TikTok happened and my books did some numbers with TikTok. And I was like, all right, how do I make this last? And so I took a risk and sold a trilogy about Greek gods, or not contemporary Greek gods that has no magic, to a publisher. And the rest, as they say, is history. And here we are.
Can I just ask, because I tried to get like an exact number and then I was like, there is too much counting. How many books have you published?
I am not entirely certain. I think I'm over 100 at this point. I'm pretty certain I'm over 100, but I've lost count. There's a count somewhere and I should probably go find it and update it. But like for quite a while was publishing like 8 to 12 books a year because
I think I just died. I think I'm dead now.
How?
Desperation. To be fair, I write very fast naturally. Like I write very quickly naturally. And category romances are like about half the size of like a single title book. So like you can write more, like put out higher numbers. And then with the pandemic, the only time I was alone was when I was in my office. And my family would only interrupt me every 20 minutes instead of every 5. And so I was like, I guess I'm just going to keep working. And that pace is not sustainable. And I'm trying to dial back. So I think like next year I have like 6 books instead of 10. So I'm trying to get down to 3. We'll see how it works.
Yeah.
I am a freak of nature. It's the ADHD hyperfocus and like the autism really likes. I write every single day. It's not that I'm putting out 10,000 word days. It's like, but if you write 2,000 words every day, it adds up to a whole lot of words and a whole lot of books over time.
I mean, your books are also really good. Some people are able to write fast like that, and I'm just like thinking about my own process, and it took me 8 years to write one book.
It's interesting because there's so much shame that can go into either writing fast or writing, like it's tied to writing speed. And one of the most beneficial things I did, because it's like you write fast, so you quote unquote churn out books, or you just put out garbage, or like whatever. There's a lot of like that language that gets thrown out there. And I took the Write Better Faster course by Becca Syme, which is like a focus on like the Gallup Strengths Finders and like other stuff. But it's kind of like, instead of trying to write better faster as a whole, it's like more like for you. Like, what does that look like for you? And it's very individualized and like no one size fits all. And so I found that course incredibly helpful to just kind of like give me permission to stop trying things that don't work for me. And as a result, I did get a little bit faster.
I have a question, just as a fellow ADHDer. Do you work on more than one project at once, like in the drafting writing phase, or no?
Sometimes I have what's called dessert projects when I have energy for it, which is not all the time, but like sometimes it's like, oh my God, like I'll like get really into a project that's like not on my list. And that will become the carrot of like, if you hit the word count on the book that is actually due, then you can write as many words as you want on this other project. And that can be really work for my brain really well. But it's usually only in the drafting process. When I'm editing, I get so into editing that I become basically a zombie and like I can barely talk to my family. But in drafting, it's a little less immersive for me. And so sometimes I can double up on projects.
So my introduction to your books was Court of the Vampire Queen, which I absolutely adored for so many reasons.
You started so strong.
She started so strong because that was in Target. I picked it up in Target or Walmart, one of them, and it was like my vacation read. And Jenny was like, I don't have anything to read. And I was like, here you go.
She's like, you are going to love this. And I picked it up and I was like, all right, I'm gonna be in the bathtub. I may be sometime. So yeah, that was my introduction to your work. This is a vampire and succubus polycule with a succubus heroine and 3 vampire heroes, very queer, scorchingly sexy. These people make eye contact and they are suddenly fucking. This was a case of insta-lust, and would you call yourself more of an insta-love, fated mates kind of person over the slow burn, or do you dabble in both? And tell us how this amazing book came to be.
So I'm a fan of the insta-lust, insta-love, insta-everything. I joke that Radiant Sin, the 4th book in the Dark Olympus series, is like a Katee Robert slow burn, and that they have sex at like, I think 50% instead of 10%. So I usually like to slow burn the emotional connection and like fast burn everything else. So this series, or that book, actually came to fruition because I had been watching this anime. Oh God, I think it's called Diabolic Lovers or something of that nature. It's like one of those quote unquote reverse harem like vampire ones, but there was elements of it that I was deeply frustrated with, and I think it's based on a dating sim according to my child. And I was just like, they should be having sex. She should be a stronger heroine. This should be like whatever. And then I just like furiously like started typing. And I'm a big fan of, if you're going to go hard. So like if you're going to have vampires, they better have some cool powers like orgasmic bites.
Absolutely. That was like on page 3 that happens. And I was like, I am here for this. There is nothing I've never been more here for.
And it was like in a kitchen immediately. And I'm just like, oh, hell yes.
He was starving. It's not his fault.
In the kitchen is where you get your snacks. It's appropriate.
But like, and if you're going to have orgasmic bites, then inevitably somebody has to lose control because it feels so good and then like put everybody in danger. Like, I like setting up the big stakes, and like you kind of have to fulfill on those promises. It's a promise I made to myself, and I don't know how the readers felt about it, but like I enjoy the stakes of paranormal are able to be so much higher than just a contemporary, even a dark romance contemporary. I had a lot of fun with those 4, like a lot of fun.
And it shows. I mean, your writing is just so fun.
I will say I was probably, like, maybe not overtly, but I read the Anita Blake series. Again, my mother had picked up, I think it's like book 9 or something, so we skipped right past the horror bits, right past the build up into like straight up orgy. And she had been like, oh, this isn't really for me, and just like left it out. And so I picked it up and I was like, oh my God. And so like my threshold for like that, like heat and like chaos and like monsters is so like high that it's like, does the limit exist? So that really comes across with that sort of when I write those types of books, because it's like, no, like if you can, you should, and so we will.
I love that you have a go big or go home aesthetic in this. Like, that is so great, and it is so fun. It's just so fun to read.
I find that I would rather be an author or write book. Well, one, I write for me first. Like I write for joy and yes, money, but joy. And so if I'm not enjoying myself, then it's like, what are we even doing here? But in addition to that, by extension of that, like I'd rather be an author that people like love or hate, like furiously love or furiously hate, than everybody be like, it's fine. It's okay. Like, I didn't hate it. There's nothing objectable about it, but like, I'm going to forget this book existed in 2 hours. And so, I embrace the extremism of that.
I mean, I defy our listeners to forget that The Court of the Vampire Queen existed in 2 hours, because that is never going away. That's like free rent in my brain.
We all have that dream trip we've been wishing we could go on, but too often life, or usually price, gets in the way. That's why Priceline is here to help you turn your dream trip into reality. With up to 60% off hotels and up to 50% off flights, you can book everything you need for your next adventure. Don't just dream about that next trip. Book it with Priceline. Download the Priceline app or visit Priceline.com and book your next trip today.
Go to your happy price, Priceline.
LinkedIn is pretty great at a lot of things, like helping you tap into the latest trends and insights in your field. We cannot stop your coworker from tapping her pencil. LinkedIn can help you find new jobs that align with your career goals. We cannot help you find the source of that weird smell in the office fridge. Ew. And while we can't stop your coworkers from bringing their hobbies into the office, LinkedIn can help you bring your career to the next level. LinkedIn is the network that works for you.
If you're chasing data down instead of seeing it in one place, you need the Intuit ERP. Intuit Enterprise Suite. All your data in one place with built-in AI for real-time insights. Learn more at intuit.com/ERP.
So one of your series is the Wicked Villains series, which I read as a series of romances where the hero is like, it's where the hero is the villain, inspired by stories that we know, like maybe Aladdin or The Little Mermaid. I read the description of this and was just like, oh, this is for me. What is it that has you endlessly falling for the villain?
I find that, and this is not always true, but I am so attracted to nuanced, interesting characters, and the villain is like the wheels on the bus of the story. Like if you don't have a good villain that's strong, that's as objectively better than the hero or heroine, then like the story doesn't go anywhere because they just defeat the villain and move on. And so, especially growing up, so many of those villains that we came across in media or stories are like really queer coded as well. And they're so interesting. And so fairy tale retellings have always been a thing, will always be a thing. I love them with my whole heart. Like if I had not been a college dropout, I would have gone on to get like my degree in history and gone on to write my thesis on fairy tales, because like I find them so fascinating on how they interlock with society and like the values of the people telling them, and like how they're adapted by whoever's doing the telling. And for me, it was just like, okay, but like, what if they were villains? Like, or what if we focus on the villains instead of the heroes? Like, what if instead of Prince Charming, it's Jafar?
I was hoping you'd say that. We had a whole discussion yesterday about how in Aladdin, like, kind of I was always rooting a little bit for Jafar. Like, he's a tyrant, but he's an honest tyrant.
I'm so interested in this Jafar conversation because Jen and I, again, we talked about this last night, and I was just like, I remember being very fascinated by characters like Jafar, and I think Maleficent also kind of falls into this category where they are quite queer-coded, and I was just like, was this a clue?
Yeah, like, it's just, and I mean, there's several characters of Jafar in the Arabian Nights. Like, he's not always a bad guy, but he's always very complicated. And I love complicated. And it's just, yeah, I had just a lot of fun, like, going, again, like, Desperate Measures was the first book that I really, like, I'd written other indie books, but that was the first one that I was like, I'm just gonna like stop worrying about like all the voices in my head telling me no and just do the thing. In hindsight, would that have been the first book in that series if I had planned it a little more intentionally? Probably not. Because it's like, again, it goes very hard, very quickly. But like, I love that series so much. I'm actually working on a second generation, like, of their adult children to kind of touch on some of the more, or the less popular fairy tales in like romance. And I'm really excited to play within those parameters.
Absolutely. And just like the idea that the one who is ostensibly the villain is in fact the love interest. The person who would be in a more traditional telling, the love interest, has more villainy qualities that are maybe not as sexy.
And especially if you know, grew up reading the Grimm's fairy tales, like the heroes are not always heroic. Like, especially in like Sleeping Beauty, for example, like that hero, quote unquote, is like does a big ol' assault on her, like a lot. And that sort of stuff of like the conflict between like the movies that we watched and some of the older versions or newer versions, honestly, because again, these are not static stories, I find deeply interesting. So I'm like, how do we play with that? How do we make this into a romance, but like with a little more teeth?
So you write a lot of dark romance, and I've asked this of other dark romance authors that we've had on the show, and my book that I have written is like, I would say maybe skating on the edge of dark romance, but I'm also not really sure how that is defined, because it sounds like you grew up reading a lot of similar books that I grew up reading, very hetero, very monogamous, alpha hole historical romance kind of stuff. So I feel like romance already kind of walks some dark lines sometimes. What do you think, in your opinion, separates a truly dark romance from other types of romance?
I find that depending on who you ask this question of, you'll have a different answer. For me, dark romance is kind of that sweet spot between horror and romance. Like, you get the cathartic release of emotions of like, or like fantasy role playing, like, because it's always a hot topic, but I view dark romance the same way that I view consensual non-consent and kink, where it's like it's an agreement between the reader and the book, and that's why content warnings are so important in my opinion, because they're making an educated decision to engage with the content. But you're getting this cathartic release, these like scenarios that objectively, like in reality, be horrifying and scary, and nobody actually wants this. But in fiction, it's like, no, like I'm on this roller coaster. It's the bumpers are on. It's just fiction. I can put this book down whenever I want. And then it's romance, so you get the soft landing at the end, and you have the assurance that no matter what happens between these two, or to these two or more, or however many, at the end, they're going to be okay, and they're going to be happy, and it's going to be fine. And whether that's like, because like I would say Wicked Villains is firmly dark romance, I would say, but like on the shallow end of the dark romance pool. And I would say, I mean, Dark Olympus gets labeled dark romance, and I would argue is not actually dark romance for the most part. Like, the next one is as close as we get, because it's a little bit of stalker romance. But it depends on like what people are reading, because, you know, they pick up Neon Gods and they're like, oh, this is dark romance. I'm like, it's actually not. It's not at all. So it's, you know, you usually have some really intense power dynamics. There's usually violence. There's oftentimes like, you know, a lot of illegal shit going on. But yeah, I think that it's just kind of that sweet spot between horror and romance, like emotionally. But like, this is like a thing I've done so much like self-analysis on, and also just analysis in general, because I think that if these books were labeled as horror romance, they would get a lot less grief than they do as like quote unquote dark romance. Just because people who don't understand the experience that readers are searching for with them think that it's like indicative of what people want. And I'm like, that's not true. It's not true. No, nobody, no.
Red flags.
Like, this is not supposed to be a guideline for how to have a relationship. Like, that's not what this is.
No. And I would argue that the vast majority of people reading these books are not, as much as they're like, ooh, you know, that hero who's a serial killer is super sexy. The vast majority of people reading are like, but also I would hit him with a car in real life. Like, I would hit him with a car and run away. And most of the authors writing are very aware of they walk that line of like, yes, he's sexy, but also like not in real life, people. Stop it.
This is not relationship goals at all. And I feel like there's such an interesting conversation here that we've been sort of having in different ways with different authors over the course of this series, because I find this topic fascinating. Both of us love dark romance. For me, growing up on, first off, really problematic 90s romance, and then coming to understand what I did and didn't like about those books, and seeking out more modern dark romance that is more conscientious about consent. Like, I think that sometimes we eroticize our fears, and something like dark romance gives us a space to safely explore those fears and that eroticism in a safe place, like as opposed to going out and finding a relationship like that, which nobody wants.
Well, and like it's really interesting because romance tends to be on the cutting edge of conversations being had on a societal level. And I find it interesting to look back at like those romances in like the 80s and like around, the ones that it's like, it's just straight up non-consent, like a lot of times. But also like for so long, like femme and like women were told like, if you like sex, you're a problem. And so like it kind of took that shame away because they're forced into it. And so it's like, well, I was forced, so I have to like it. And so it's like, within the context of that, like, yes, obviously they don't hold up now in the same way, but also like they were pretty cutting edge for the time they're being told in. And it's just, I find it deeply interesting to like kind of look at like how romance interacts with like larger conversations that are being had, and like of pleasure, and like who gets to have it, and like who's like shame, and like all of those, and consent now. And like I remember, God, it was 5 or 7, it was less than 10 years ago, because it's since I've been an author, like there was a really long ongoing conversation of like, do we put like condoms in romance? Like, how do you do that? Like, is that a thing that should happen? And like, should we be having these conversations like on the page? And like I think that there's space for like fantasy without, but also it's gotten normalized to the point that if I don't see a condom or like some kind of like, hang the paper lantern on the conversation about protection, then I'm going to assume that there's a baby coming. Like, so for better or worse.
Unless you're in a historical, context where there aren't condoms.
Or maybe paranormal.
Well, yeah, paranormal has great workarounds, though, because you're like, I have a tattoo, and it's magic, and I can't have babies till I'm ready.
That's super convenient.
Yeah, or like in my monster series, they get pendants. They get pendants that are magic birth control pendants. How do they work? It's magic.
Exactly.
That is actually kind of an interesting thought, too, because one of the things I'm wrestling with, I have a book that's coming out in February, and then another one that's coming out, like the book 2 of that. And one of the things I'm kind of thinking about is how are they dealing with thoughts around pregnancy and conception? And like the hero is, one of those super overprotective types. Like, is he gonna have a problem with having unprotected sex with his wife, who that might harm her if she gets pregnant in an very unoptimal situation, let's just say. So these are all things that I'm thinking about now too. And I'm like, do I just sort of gloss over that, or do they have a real conversation about that?
Yeah, it's definitely, my plans and stuff have definitely changed for several of my series since like Roe versus Wade was overturned, because like the monster series was meant to be like a breeding kink series initially, and I was just like, yeah, like we're gonna do it, like it's gonna be, because like it's a kink for a reason. It's, as long as you content warn that stuff so people don't like walk into it without warning, like cool. And then that happened, and I was like, no, we're gonna put abortions in this series. Like it's a thing that's gonna happen. And I realized that like I'd been a little lax about the context of abortion, like on page, not necessarily like the procedure itself, but just like historically. And like I mean, I think it's disingenuous to be like, well, yeah, a lot of my characters have had abortions, I just didn't mention it because like that's not fair. So I'm like, no, going forward, every time somebody complains about it, somebody else gets an abortion, which is obviously not how I do that, but like you're going to see my work in the future and perpetually, because I think it's really important to destigmatize it where we can.
I absolutely agree. And I think, if conception can be part of the romance story, then abortion can be part of the romance story.
And I think that's super important because it's not, as you said, I do think romance leads a lot of these conversations, and it's a conversation we should be having and shouldn't have shame around.
And like having heroes who give a shit about the damage that their dicks do, like I think that is nice to see on the page, you know?
Yes, yes. And like it's been really interesting because a character in Dark Olympus has an abortion and it's pretty vital to the plot. And then like it's the crux of some of the conflict in the romance in her book. But it's not because she had it. Like he's not mad that she made that choice. He's mad that she didn't trust him to talk to him so that he could support her in making that choice, which like he doesn't handle that well. He's like, "No, you think I'm going to murder you? Well, I'm going to let you continue thinking that because that's reasonable." But it was really important for me to not have it be because she made that choice that he's mad at her because that's shitty and that's not really forgivable to me. Like it's so silly to me. And I mean, silly as like, oh, that feral dog, he's so cute. But like, it's so silly to me that this hero is like, I can't believe she thought I would ever hurt her. I cannot believe that. I'm so hurt by that. And so I'm going to perpetuate her fear that I might hurt, not by hurting her, but just, by letting her know that like, maybe I just murder somebody and drop them on the doorstep like a feral cat. Just, I would never hurt her, but
I think I know which Dark Olympus one this is.
yeah, it's definitely it's my second feral cat hero of the series, and so I love that trope, I guess. I don't know if it's a trope, but it is for me.
You walk into a candlelit room where a girl in a feathered mask greets you. Her identity is one of your city's best-kept secrets. No one is supposed to know a nightbird's true face. And that isn't why you came. You came for this girl's rare and highly illegal form of magic. She's about to gift it to you with a kiss, and you know it will be worth the price. Hi, Ancient History fangirl listeners. I'm Kate Armstrong, and you might know me as the host over on The Exploress, a podcast where we time travel through history to find out what life was really like for women of the past. Welcome to the world of Nightbirds, my 1920s tinted fantasy novel, which you can buy now wherever good books are sold. I'm popping in to tell you that its sequel, Firebirds, hits shelves on August 27th. If you like female-focused stories with lots of historical inspiration, glittering settings, and intrigue, I think this one might just be for you. So, be careful who you kiss, and fly carefully.
Lululemon just made the coziest matching set to get you to and from Pilates. Meet the Steady State hoodie and sweatpants, a fan favorite from our men's line, reimagined in Superloft fabric that's smooth on the outside, fleecy soft on the inside. Level up your comfort in the new Steady State Superloft, available now at lululemon.com.
When you want your spring break to feel like... and your kids' pool day to feel like... and your hotel bed to feel like... ooh, and room service to feel like... because at Hilton, hospitality feels like...
Your cabana's ready. Would you like fresh towels?
It matters where you stay. Book now at Hilton.com. Hilton, for the stay.
Time to turn to Dark Olympus, which is how I found your books, because I'm a massive nerd, particularly about Greek mythology. And in a different world, I might have gone on and done a master's in exactly what you said about fairy tales, but about mythology, like how it intersects, why we tell these stories, why the stories were told, what parts of mythology show up in archaeological stuff. I'm a huge nerd for like this horrible end of the world story, but then there was a volcano. Are they linked? So what was it like drawing from Greek mythology for the Dark Olympus series and creating this sort of modern world Greek mythology telling without magic? What was the world building like, and which characters were you most excited to tell the stories of?
I knew I wanted to tell Greek mythology because like I've been like I did a book report on the Odyssey in like 4th grade, which in hindsight's deeply hilarious because like I'm Odysseus's number one hater. Like Penelope should have poisoned his wine the moment he arrived home.
Penelope should have taken that throne for herself and kicked all the suitors and everyone out.
Honestly, she's running that shit for 20 years, and then he just shows up and is all, ugh.
I know. I'm a Penelope and like Clytemnestra stan. I'm like, listen, the dudes have not served either of you well. Just do what you got to do.
Exactly.
A bath and axe easily solve problems, ladies.
So yeah, I knew I wanted to like, because I had Wicked Villains, and I was like, I think Greek myths is like my also a special interest, and I would like to jump into that. And so obviously I started with two of the stories that have like the equivalent of a happily ever after, which is Hades and Persephone and Psyche and Eros. And then after that, it was kind of like justice for the characters that I felt needed justice. And like, because Greek mythology is just heavy in tragedies and light in happily ever afters. And I was like, no, happily ever afters for everyone, except not Paris. Because again, screw him. My favorite part of that series is something that exists solely because I had written a Hades in Wicked Villains, and I was like, how do I have two Hades in the same world? Like, what? How does that make sense? Without it just being like, don't look at this, it's fine. And so I created this system of like government, I guess, that like there's always 13 titles that rule, like non-gendered titles that rule Olympus, and they all kind of have their specialties and like whatever. And so there's always like a Hades, but there's not always necessarily the same Hades, or a Zeus, or Artemis, or whatever. And it allowed me to do this really, because like I'm a very character forward writer, and for pretty much every god or goddess, there's like, oh, they were so good, they were heroic in this myth, and then it's like, oh, they murdered a lot of people unfairly in this other myth. And so it allowed me to kind of like play with those disparities with like, okay, like, well, maybe it was the last Apollo that was, a sexual assaulter, and maybe this one's like the sweet baby angel that we really like. And so from there, it's kind of just picking the pieces that I wanted. And I joke that this series is like the Fast and Furious version of like myth. It's like, it's super sexy. Get in the car. You're going to have a great time. Don't look too closely at the details. If you're looking for a very like historically accurate-ish retelling, this is not it. This is vibes. And like, I intentionally put in like Easter eggs and bits and pieces for people who like do know the myths well, so that they're like, oh, I see that. Like, it's like, I see you, you see me. But for the ones who are familiar with it, it's like, you're not really, I don't think, missing a bunch. And it made sense in building this world that I was like, yeah, it's going to be kind of like basically Gossip Girl on a larger scale, because Greek myths are that. Like, it's salacious, they're sexy, they're, a lot of them are really queer. And what if we put them in this modern day setting and had like public perception be the thing that people judge them by instead of like worship? And like, how do we play with that perception and personas and like what have you? There's like an ongoing theme of like the masks we wear in public. Yeah, so from there it's just kind of built organically. Thankfully my editor's phenomenal, and so when I'm like, I would like to do something crazy, she's like, yes, tell me more. So like with book 5, I was like, it's supposed to be Hephaestus and Aphrodite, and I was like, actually I would like to put Pandora in there as well. Like, I want it to be polyamorous. And she's like, what if we also put Adonis in there? And I was like, yes, immediately, yes. This is exactly what I need in my life. Yes. So so it's just been kind of built out from there. I'm almost done. I have one more book to write. I'm a couple books ahead of release, and then I don't know what we're doing. It'll be interesting.
The first book in the series is a Hades and Persephone retelling. And there are so many Hades and Persephone retellings out there. I really enjoyed this one. Why do you think we keep going back to the story of Hades and Persephone?
I mean, it's got so many just evergreen themes. Like, you have like the dark hero who's like maybe misunderstood or maybe not, depending on which version you're looking at. There's the overbearing mother figure who like is ready to burn the world to reclaim her daughter, who may or may not want to be reclaimed. And then the interesting component for me is Persephone, because, and I'm not the only one to do this. I will never say I'm the first or only one to ever do anything ever, but like, so many versions of Hades and Persephone focus on her as like this sunshine spring goddess, and kind of ignore the fact that she always had the Queen of Darkness inside of her. Like, she didn't change because of him. He, in my mind anyways, created the like opportunity for her to like step into this role that she embodies equally with the springtime goddess. And so that was kind of the angle I took on Neon Gods, was like, no, she was always like the dread queen. Like she was always had this in her. She just didn't necessarily allow it to be shown until she had the freedom and the safety to do so. But like I've messed with the Persephone, like Demeter, Persephone, Hades. Like I have a romantic suspense old book that there's like a Demeter Persephone cult in it, and it's like it's been a story that I've kind of like looked at from all different angles, like through various books and stuff over the years. And so it was like when it was finally the time to tell it, I was like, yeah, we're. And also it's like it's basically the template for dark romance. Like you have the hero who may or may not kidnap the heroine. She's captive willingly or not. It really just depends. And I know that the hardcore mythology people are like, no, the one true version. And I'm like, that's Christianity talking. There is no one true version. This is myth. It was an oral tradition that just happened to be written down. And even in its writing format, there's still more than one version. So
I love that myth because it can be a romance, it can be an absolute horror, it can be a coming of age, it can be anything because, as you say, there is no one true version. There are versions that we think may be closer to the ancient sources, but they were all oral traditions and they would have been told slightly differently to explain how life worked for people in the ancient world, particularly women.
Exactly. And like the people who wrote it down were men. So like how did their like biases affect that? And like I think that a lot of people don't necessarily consider, well, people who aren't like historians, because like the historians are like, yeah, there's like 27 plus versions of the Iliad, like yeah, it just depends. But the more like laymen are like, no, it's the one true version, that's the real version. I'm like, there's not actually a real version.
Yeah, and the version that has come down to us might not be the same version of the story a mother would tell to her daughter about Hades and Persephone, you know, because they were written down by men, and the ones that came down to us and continue to, a lot of them are filtered through a Christian lens, which have a certain agenda they are trying to put forward.
The patriarchy. Well, and that's why, like, both myths and fairy tale, because it's folklore, like the umbrella of folklore, as I lump them both under. When I see people be like, oh, like that fairy tale's like old has been, or like whatever, like we have enough, and I'm like, but we don't, because there are a lot of people with various marginalizations who haven't had a chance to tell their version of the story yet, or like different lived experiences, and like that's what makes the story fresh, even though we know the beats by heart. And I don't think that there's ever enough, because there's still more avenues to be explored by different storytellers.
Staying in the dark Olympus universe, the myth of Eros and Psyche is one of my favorites. And as a larger person, I loved that your Psyche was a plus-size woman and that her narrative was about love. And, you know, there was that whole pesky mother-in-law who wanted to murder her, but, you know, that always happens. This narrative it's a romance. It's about her not needing to change herself to be loved. What made you decide on this retelling of the myth? And again, why do you think this story is pretty evergreen?
I mean, it's Eros and Psyche at its heart is almost a Beauty and the Beast story. It just has like an extra half at the end. It's, you know, it's one of those ones that's just really known. Like if somebody picks up that story, whoever's telling it, and they're going to be like, oh, I understand the beats of this. I recognize this. But like if you've read any of my books at this point, you know that I'm very contentious. I like exploring contentious themes with parents, especially overbearing mothers. And like, whereas I view Demeter as kind of like a Olenna Tyrell from Game of Thrones, or like a Kris Jenner type situation, like Aphrodite's Cersei, like that's kind of like, she's vindictive and, you know, kind of selfish, and like, yeah, she loves her son, but it's like so toxic. And then when I was creating Psyche, I was like, obviously she's an influencer. Like that just fits so perfectly with like the most beautiful woman in the world kind of thing. And it's like, why couldn't she be fat? What's wrong with that? Like, why? And so, and like I said, I trying to be more intentional with like, there's a lot more fat representation in books, in romance books, than there used to be, but there's so much room for more. And like, I wanted this woman who's so desired and so like sought after, and like has Eros just losing his damn mind immediately, to be, you know, not necessarily like the quote unquote traditional representation of beauty. And that book the way that that book's resonated through readers like humbles me on a deep level, because like I was, I was writing it for me and wanting to see myself represented, and like, yeah, it's humbling to see that that like has resonated so deeply and has like affected people like really emotionally, and like because it affected me. So like I just, I always hope, but I never assume. And so there are a lot more fat characters in this series and like in all of my work now.
Yeah, and it's just wonderful to actually see that, and that the journey is about love and not about having to change yourself to be worthy of love or any of the really toxic messages of the 90s and early 2000s. And that was the second book of yours I read, and I was just like, she's the most beautiful woman, and she gets to be round, and the guy likes her, and this is just, she gets an insta lust.
I feel like for a very long time, it was kind of like, oh, you can have fat characters, but in order for them to get their happily ever after, they have to lose weight, or they have to like change, or like the makeover inevitably comes with like, oh, you lost 10 pounds or like whatever. And so like I think that's just yucky.
Or they're the comic relief. And you still see it a lot. It's very tropey. They're the comic relief. They're either the person you don't want to date, or they're the best friend, the sassy sidekick. And it's really tough. It's really toxic, and it's really buried in there. So I'm glad that in your series in particular, you don't do that. People can have their happily ever afters and their great sex and romances, however they are.
And their love interests who are deeply obsessed with them. Like every dimple and roll and like curve, there's a lot of like, I want to sink my teeth into them, which I don't know, but like, but it's just, it's a deep appreciation, because beauty is not just a very finite, like limited definition, in my opinion. I find all sorts of people beautiful, and so I try to put that in my books.
In Wicked Beauty, you reinvent the story of Helen and Achilles and Patroclus. What drew you to these characters? And did you use any sort of history or mythology in the sort of games and challenges that they partake in to become the new Ares?
Yeah, so I knew, like, again, this is one of those ones that I was like, oh, like it's gonna be Achilles and Helen, and then I was like, no, that feels kind of yucky, because like Patroclus is such like a intrinsic part of his story, and so I was like, okay, well, we're not gonna kill my babies, and I didn't necessarily take from myth for the trials themselves, but the elimination order is from the Trojan War, of how they like the order of which people died, but nobody dies in my book. Because like, and it's interestingly, that book was really the turning point for the series, because until that point there was still a lot of like hate readers that were like, oh, this isn't like true to mythology and stuff, and people were so upset about Wicked Beauty, and like for various reasons. But in my opinion, I'm like, but they die tragically. They're still alive apparently. So the people who like get it and like are into it really enjoyed Wicked Beauty and have continued reading the series, and the people who are deeply upset by it, I think I've mostly dropped off at this point, because I'm like, it's okay that I'm not for you, but like, imagine if they were happy. Imagine there. And Helen deserved better.
So one thing I just love and admire about your books is that you really get deep into kink. You are not afraid to make your sex scenes kinky, BDSM inspired, and you do it so well. What are your thoughts about effectively writing kinky sex scenes and incorporating kink into romance?
I think that it's much like it's an extension of, I mean, obviously, for me personally, it's an extension of, I find that sex scenes reveal so much about characters, because you're very inherently vulnerable physically with a person. And because I write so character first, the kinks usually surprise me, which is deeply hilarious, because, for example, in Midnight Ruin, which is whatever book number it is, 6, I think, I was writing it, and like one of my best friends used to be a dominatrix, and so occasionally I'll text her stuff and like ask questions. And I wrote this scene, and I was like, I think I'm writing puppy play. And I was like, am I writing puppy play? And I like sort of sketched out, and she's like, you are in fact writing puppy play. And I'm like, shit, I don't know much about this. I need to do some research. And like, puppy play is a wide umbrella, just like most things in kink. Like, it really depends on the people engaging in that particular scenario. But it's a lot of fun and exploration, and just kind of like, I don't have much trouble with like once you understand the power dynamics, there's so many different ways that that's applicable, and like how you can mess with that and just create some really interesting conflict, or not conflict, as it were, or like pave the way through conflict with kink. And it's just, I don't know, I find it very honest, like, because you have to be honest in order to engage in safe kink, which, I mean, alternately, like, what happens if you aren't honest, which is not something we deal with in Dark Olympus, but like it's something that I will be messing with like in other series later on, because it's like, what happens if the people engaging aren't necessarily, maybe there's like some self-harm going on, like what happens if you abuse this, like the trust between you, like how does that go? And it's just it's just rife with like drama and deliciousness, and I deeply love it.
Can I ask a question just for our listeners? What is puppy play?
So puppy play, again, wide umbrella, everything from like role playing like you're a dog, bark like a dog, to where Midnight Ruin lands is more like praise and degradation. Like, if you're gonna act like a bad dog, get down on your knees and crawl, like, you know, or like whatever. Or if you're gonna apologize, then like be a proper dog and do the thing. But it's that, those, and then everything in the middle. So it's just kind of depends on the people engaging with it.
Refreshing wild cherry cola meets smooth cream. The treat you deserve. Pepsi Wild Cherry and Cream. Treat yourself.
Picture this: a curve in the road, a change in plans. Well, what do you say? With the all-new Audi Q3, the answer's always yes. Yes to adventure. Yes to escape. Yes to performance. Yes to comfort. Yes to right now. Because saying yes without hesitation, that's real luxury. The all-new Audi Q3, made for the yes life.
This episode is brought to you by Peloton. Welcome to your Peloton Pilates era. Trusted by over 2 million members, experienced instructors with true Pilates expertise, offering classes for every level. Choose from 10 to 45-minute sessions with little to no equipment. Anytime, anywhere. And with the cross-training swivel screen, you can move seamlessly from cardio to mat. Press Pilates. Small moves, big impact. Find out more at onepeloton.com/Pilates.
What are some of your favorite kinks to depict on the page?
Oh man, the one that surprised me because I almost chickened out is actually like the like daddy baby girl play, because it almost wasn't in Desperate Measures, because I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I don't know if I understand the dynamics of this enough for it not to be like feel squicky. But I promised the internet I would do it, and I'm too much of a coward to walk back on that. So I was like, I gotta figure it out. And it turns out it's something that like is really fun to write. Like, it's really fun to like thread that needle. And yeah, so that it's shown up in multiple books now at this point, and probably will more in the future as well.
Gosh, that sounds so fun. And it sounds like something that like as a reader, I'd be like, I don't know if I would like that on paper, but I know you're writing and I trust you as an author. So I'd be like, in your hands, I bet I would just love it.
I mean, that's the deepest compliment, was when readers are like, I didn't think I wanted this, but then you gave it to me, and I think I like this, which like as a reader, that's my favorite thing, of being like, no, I definitely don't want this. And then like I read it from a particular author and I'm like, I did actually need this desperately, and now I need more.
Yeah, exactly. The last conversation that we had with an author, we were talking about sweet cinnamon roll kind of golden retriever heroes. And I was talking about how, like, I wouldn't think I'd like that on paper, but every so often somebody surprises me. And I like being surprised as a reader. Like, there are things that I really, really know I like, and I'm probably going to like that in most iterations that I see. And then there are some things that I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to like this, but I'm going to try it. And then I love it. And that is like the high risk, high reward of reading.
That's because golden retrievers are, they're all nice and friendly until like it's the touch her and die, or touch him and die, or touch them and die. Then they just like the teeth come out and you're like, I did not expect that from you, but I'm here for it.
I avoided like Haunting Adeline for a really long time, because I was like, I've been stalked. It's not sexy. It's super scary. It's not for me. Like, I understand why people enjoy it, but it's not for me. And then Kate C. Wells, who's one of my go-to authors, that like anything she writes, I'll read, even though she consistently puts out books that I'm like, I don't think I want this. And then I read it and I'm like, I did, in fact, thank you. And so she wrote her second mafia romance is called Nicky the Driver, and he's a stalker. And I read that, I inhaled that book and I was like, okay, like I see now, I get it. And then I went and read Haunting Adeline, and from like a craft standpoint, like I understand people upset by that. I'll never tell people not to be upset by like certain tropes or whatever, but from a craft standpoint was so interesting because the way the heroine paves the way and makes you complicit, and like the way their dynamic makes the reader complicit in all the things that go on, which is why that book works for so many people. And it gave me like, I got a frenzy and I went and wrote my own stalking romance after reading those two books. So like I was like, y'all did something. I didn't think I wanted this, and it turns out I like it in the proper hands.
There are so many dark romances I've read where I've had this feeling of like, I'm scared, but I'm gonna keep going. But I think that's what makes it erotic to me.
Yeah, what's interesting, because like dark romance tends to be my palate cleanser. Like when I don't know what to read, I'm like, I'm gonna pick up something and I want to be shocked and scandalized. But like, I'm kind of hard to shock and scandal. It's such an interesting thing because like it's not that the extremism that like it, but it's just it's the complicity. I really think it is. Like I think that when an author does that well, I'm so engaged, and then I'm sending screenshots to my best friend like, oh, do you see what's happening? Or like, look what they wrote. Isn't this scandalous?
We literally had a group chat about Haunting Adeline, and like we all loved it. Like it was just wild. I was the last one to read it, and I'd be like, they were like, oh, well, when you get to that scene, just text us and let us know what you think. And I was like, oh, I think I'm at that scene. And then I'd text them where I was, and they'd be like, that's not the scene. I'd be like, oh, it's going to get worse than this? They're like, yeah.
You'll know it when you get there. Yeah, no, a friend of mine, an author friend of mine, emailed me a while back and was like, Katie, you need to read this duology. And I was like, cool, I trust you. And I downloaded it. No context, didn't read the blurb, no idea. For the first 10%, I'm like, what the fuck am I reading? Like, is this horror? Is this romance? Is this horror romance? It's horror romance. And like, it's not one that I recommend without caveats because the content warnings are really intense. Like, he's a werewolf and he does take literal bites out of her and kind of wants to murder her, eat her a little bit at some point. However, the prose is so gorgeous. It's such a phenomenal book. Like I haven't read the second one yet because I'm like, I gotta take a little breather. I gotta take a breather. But it's called Then Earth Swallowed Ocean, and it's a lot. But I loved it. I loved it so much. It's very sexy and dark.
I think you've sold me. I'm just like, gosh, if I ever write anything that shocks and appalls and scandalizes you, I will be thrilled.
It's interesting. Like, I'm actually think I'm going to be moving into horror romance. Like, it's a very interesting subgenre that is intentional in a way that I feel like sometimes dark romance doesn't quite nail. Not dark romance as a whole, but like certain stories within dark romance. And the possibilities when you label properly, and so readers kind of have more idea of what to expect, like you can go a little harder apparently. And I'm like, I'm excited by the possibility of this and a little bit scared, so let's see what happens. It's interesting because again, like, and this is where like I had a really moral quandary for a long time as a reader or writer even, because I was like, why does this like not titillate, but like why does this like, you know, crank the engine periodically? And then I was like, oh, for the same reason that consensual non-consent does. And it's because it's a safe exploration of like a really intense fantasy, but again, safe being the key factor because you're engaging it in a fictional way that for a number of people for a variety of reasons is again really cathartic, and sometimes that cathartic comes across as deeply sexy, and they're not real people. And like it feels different than viewing it as well. Like I think dark romance in movies has a lot harder time than in written format because you're not in the character's mind, so you can't see that while, you know, like you can't see exactly what's going on like in the brain piece.
I'm getting all sweaty now, but it's also just my apartment.
Yeah, she doesn't have air conditioning on.
I mean, like, the Gothic is, like, I was deeply into Jane Eyre, like, deeply. And Rochester is, like, the worst, like, objectively He is the worst, but like I like him better than Darcy. I'm a complicated individual.
Same.
No one's surprised.
Like, of course you do, because Darcy's Darcy, you know? Darcy's the guy you marry, and Rochester's the guy you're like, I don't know, maybe I want to fuck you or just fuck around with you for a while, because this is not going to end well.
No, and it's funny how people make conjectures about like, oh, you write this, so you must. I'm like, my husband is this most cinnamon roll, sweet baby angel. Like he is like he's a wife guy. And so no, did not marry a dark romance hero, and I would run over most of my heroes with a car because like, no, thank you.
I'm very single. So this is basically my romantic outlet, but also, yeah, I'm like, I'm not gonna date these guys, but I kind of am in my head.
Yeah, fictional boyfriends are the way to go, or girlfriends, or are they friends?
Or both, honestly, both and all. This actually leads straight into my next question, which is that a lot of your books are queer and poly. I absolutely love that, and I've been getting really into this type of romance, and books like yours have felt like a revelation to me. I'm a queer woman. I'm a longtime romance fan who really grew up reading very heteronormative monogamous romance, because that was what romance was defined as for a really long time. What drew you to writing romance that sort of transgressed that very hetero-monogamous model?
I mean, I am also queer, and like I said, I was told no a lot, like a lot of like no, like because even as recently as like 2012, 2015, people are like, ooh, if it's queer, it might just be erotica. Like it was like a firmly like if it's poly, if it's queer, it's probably going to be in the erotica category. And so which is obviously not the case now, thank goodness, and like, but we have so much further to go as always. But when I started like writing for myself first and like traditional second, it was like, no, like F that, everybody's queer. And maybe we're not like, I definitely like my internal stuff is like, because I don't necessarily like, I like queer as a label. I don't necessarily feel the need to define down to the nitty gritty. I understand why people do, and I like deeply respect it, but like, I would rather just kind of leave that a little open ended and just have it be like, this is just how it is. It's not a pinch point or a pain point, or there's no friction. It's just accepted, and it's like everybody had. I think Ariadne and the Minotaur are my token straight couple, and that's mostly because they were only ever for each other, and which is not that they're not queer, it's just that they're only for each other. So I wanted the queer normative world, and now I refuse to do anything else. And whatever that looks like for whatever the couples or characters or like thruples or morples, I don't know, like whatever that poly or not. Yeah. So that's kind of like, I just want it to be like just a thing. It's a safe space. Like there's enough awfulness and friction over people's identities and who they are in the real world. Like I don't want it in my fiction. And so thankfully I sell well enough, and then partnered with an editor initially who really supports that now I can kind of do whatever I want, and nobody tells me no on that level, at least. Actually, nobody really tells me no at all. Or it's like, hey, like we see what you're trying to do. Like I do intense edits, but it's not like, no, we can't do that, Katie. It's like, oh, like, yeah, fuck yeah, let's do it. So that's if I can do that, if that means if my books sell well while queer, while openly queer and sexy and whatever, then hopefully that paves the way for more retailers and vendors being like, oh, there's a desire for this, and like maybe we should stock more. And especially in like the face of like our current climate where queerness is getting linked up with like pornography somehow magically, like that's kind of revolutionary, like for everybody who's doing that. And so I think it's deeply important for me anyways to like continue to like kick that, or with my peers kick that door down. Like I'm just deeply not the only one doing it.
It's so important, and it's so important that the audience is there and that it sells and that you're doing it and colleagues are doing it and publishers are publishing it, because that wasn't always the case. And I do think in the way our climate and country is going at the moment, we need to see more of those stories, and we need to normalize them, because they're there and they've always been there, and nobody should police who you love.
No, and like the amount of people of all identities and marginalizations and what have you deserve to see themselves in the pages of their books. Like that's, if I can step on my pedestal for just a moment, like that. But like when I talk about Fast and the Furious, like everybody, my editors constantly laughing at me because it's like, no, like this is why. Because so like in 2019, Gail Simone, the comics writer, like tweeted something that was like, yeah, she'd been talking with a Hollywood executive and they've been like, well, Fast and Furious has done more to promote inclusive casting than any kind of outrage or like whatever, because those movies make money. And we live in a capitalist hellscape and money talks. And this is, publishing is the same way. Like, so if you have books that are queer or, you know, Black, Indigenous, trans, whatever, that like are making money, that tells publishers that like, oh, I guess people want these stories, like shocking, right? And so that's why it's so important for readers to read these books and booksellers to recommend them and librarians to recommend them and like, you know, all the way down the ladder to tell our corporate overlords that these stories are worth telling.
Let's talk monster romance. Your imagination is so varied and dirty, and I just love that. And you have romances where the love interest is a kraken or a gargoyle or a dragon. And what are some of the challenges you faced writing a romance where your hero is a monster and not a human? And what draws you to these types of stories?
So I had read, I mean, you know, we all watched Beauty and the Beast as children and had feelings. Like nobody preferred the Prince human version.
I was going to say, once he's been turned into a human, I'm done. I'm out. He's just boring. He's just a dude.
Yeah. And so when I was like, I'd kind of been like, I think monster romance, like whatever, like has some really interesting stuff going on. And I had read His Beauty by Jack Harbin is like a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but like he stays the monster at the end, and it's delightful. And I was like, oh, I want more like this. And then I kind of like, at the time, it's not the case now, but at the time I looked around and I was like, I read a bunch of monster romance. It was either like really dark or like he wasn't monstery enough for me. And so I was like, I think I'm just gonna, like, I really want to write monster romance, and I want it to be like with the covers, like the old school romance bodice ripper covers on it, but monsters, because that's funny to me and I love it.
Oh my God, I love that so much. Because I'm just like a super fan of old 80s bodice rippery covers. So like if there is a kraken on that cover with a lady getting her bodice ripped, oh God, I'm dead.
Those covers went so hard. And again, I really like the idea of like calling back to like what came before, but also modernizing. And so my artist for those covers is Anna Moshek, and she's freaking phenomenal. But I don't know what I set out to do with those, but they ended up being like these really cozy trauma stories. And like every single one of them hurts my feelings. I'm writing the final one right now, actually, and it's hurting my feelings. And it's just, historically, the monster has really represented like the underrepresented or like been a disability metaphor or like what have you. And so to have these women who were so traumatized and damaged and like, you know, have gone through some shit, every single one of them's gone through some shit, kind of find these really soft romances with like these like physically monstrous people. Because the fifth, I don't know, one of the monsters is non-binary and one's a lady. So there's a little, or a lady / non-binary. So there's a little bit of everything's queer normative in my world. Yeah, so they just end up being like these cozy little, like really sexy, contained stories that I've like just had so much fun with. But it's interesting that I missed the mark a little bit with the dragon, because he's got two peens, and I didn't do double penetration, and that was really upsetting for some readers, and I'm sorry.
You didn't?
Well, in my defense, the size difference is so intense that they have to use magical cream to like rectify the damage done by the size difference. So doing two at the same time felt very reckless. In hindsight, it's fantasy. I can do what I want. But at the time, it felt very reckless. And I've since been notified of the error of my ways, and so I've sought to rectify that with the rest of the monster romances to fulfill on the promise.
It's just like what Chekhov says, if the double peen appears in the second act, a double penetration must happen by the fifth act.
It's apparently true, and I'm sorry.
It's Chekhov, okay?
Yeah.
What sold me on this series is we have a mutual friend, Jenny and I, who was like, oh yeah, you've got to read these Katee Robert books because they're monster love and there's, they deal with all the issues you would have with coupling with monster. Also, very sweet aftercare dragon who just knows how to take care of a lady. And I was like, all right.
Aftercare dragon. That was a selling point for me.
He's the soft baby angel of this series because, like, my succubus is pretty soft. Like, she's very, very, very soft. But yeah, no, that dragon, he just wants to take care of her. He just wants to take care of her and maybe chase her through the woods a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Right,
Foreplay.
Yeah.
But gotta get the blood pumping a little.
So let's talk tropes a little bit. What romance tropes make you absolutely weak at the knees? And this is just like, could be traditional ones like one bed, touch them and die, grumpy and sunshine, forced proximity, or, maybe a weird niche one that people wouldn't expect.
Or Jenny's favorite, enemies to lovers.
I love a good enemies to lovers. I really love like a marriage of convenience or fake romance, or anywhere that's at that forced proximity and intimacy when it's not really earned yet. My all-time favorite though is morality chain, where like one character doesn't have morals and so adopts the morals of their love interest. Like, so the best example of this is Heart of Obsidian by Nalini Singh. Like, he would literally murder babies, but he's like, oh, it might make her sad, so I guess I won't kill the world, fine.
This is such a dark romancy trope that I also love, yes.
Yeah, so, like, it's one of my favorites, like, it's cropping up more often than it used to, but, like, every time I find it done, like, really well, I'm like, yes, this is the way. Don't murder the babies, because it would make her sad. It's so, yeah, so I write it periodically. I try to, like, ration myself, because if it was that's all I would do, I think, otherwise.
What are some of I think we've discussed some of these in terms of kinks, but what are some of your just favorite sex tropes? And are there any that are turnoffs? Just, not to yuck anyone's yum, just for you.
So every time I say that, like, I don't think I want this, somebody usually Sierra Simone proves me wrong, that I'm like, oh yeah, brothers should bone. That's fine. I don't see a problem with that. Oh, yeah, seems legit. So as far as sex tropes, for me, it's so unique to the characters. So it's like, it's not necessarily that I'm like, I want that. It's more like, I want them to realize the thing that they're doing, like, in their most honest form, which is very unsatisfying as an answer. But yeah, because like, I love pet names. Like, especially the pet names that slip out, like, right before orgasm, that it's like, oh no, I do like you.
Of all the romances and series that you've written, as we've discussed, there's like 100. What is the couple, series, or world that you fell hardest for, and why?
So if we're talking world, it's probably Dark Olympus, just because I've never spent 10 books in a single world before, like, with a through arc. And that's been really, really fun and rewarding for me, even though I am very ready to be done. Like, I'm ready to wrap it up, but it's been so fun to, like, drop a stone and watch the ripples, which, like, you can't necessarily do as effectively in a trilogy. But couples, one of my favorites is James and Kerrigan from The Wedding Pact. I think it's now called Heated Rivals. They repackaged it. And I don't know why. I think he's just the first, like, really bad hero I wrote. Like, he does some torture, just a little bit of torture. They deserved it. It's fine. Just a tiny. And, like, it's like a forbidden love, which I don't write very often, but, like, it was just so much fun. And that couple, for some reason, just continues to, like, stick with me to this day, all these years later. And, of course, Hermes is my queen. I'm deeply afraid of her story because I love her so much. But she actually wasn't even supposed to have a book, but, like, by, like, 2 or 3 books in, I'm like, I think the final book is Hermes, and, like, here's why. And my editor's like, no, that makes sense. We'll do that. So, because, like, I'm not a plotter, I'm an intuitive writer, and so, like, I'll plot out, like, the arc of the series of, like, here's where we end, but, like, along the way, a lot of stuff changes, and so Hermes is one of those unexpected delights that I didn't plan on, but she steals every scene she's in, and I love her deeply.
I'm so excited for Hermes' book. Like, I'm not going to ask anything. I want to be surprised.
Yes. I am.
There's a world where legends race across city skylines, romance blossoms in glittering ballrooms, and there's magic around every corner. It's a world known to many as Great Britain. You've seen the action on screen. Now visit the real star of the show. Visit Great Britain. To discover more, go to tripadvisor.com/Great Britain.
Really bad at secrets, but I'm keeping it moderately locked down to try to preserve the reading experience for everybody else.
Thank you so much for coming on this show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Where can people find you online, Katee?
Oh, that's a good question. I am on Threads too much. It's a problem. If you want to ensure you don't miss stuff from me, my newsletter is like the go-to for information at all times that is not prey to the algorithms. I'm on Instagram a little bit, and I used to be on TikTok, but not really anymore. Like, yeah, it's mostly Threads these days.
Just Katee Robert with 2 E's?
Oh, yeah. Katee, 2 E's _ Robert, no S.
Once again, thanks for coming on the show, and thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you whenever we see you next.